Looking into the coronary circulation a little bit more, we have to really fine-tune and get the idea of how this works and why it's so important. Well, why it's so important is hopefully kind of obvious because the heart needs blood. And not just because the heart pumps blood, but the heart is a living tissue. It's made up of all this cardiac muscle. That cardiac muscle, just like any other tissue in the body, needs blood. This coronary circulation is what feeds that cardiac muscle. Now, all of this is how the blood is getting fed into the heart. But there's also something we didn't mention, these collateral routes. Now, collateral routes are a way of kind of safeguarding itself. So if one way doesn't quite work, you can get around it a different way. Think about it if you're trying to get from point A to point B. You take a straight line. But a collateral route could be going out a block, over and back in. Still gets there, just a different route. That's collateral routes. And your heart has several of these. Now, even with all these collateral routes, there still can be problems though. So first off, let's look at the anterior view coronary circulation. Left coronary artery and right coronary artery. You'll notice right here, they're both coming off of the aortic arch, that ascending aorta. What that's trying to do is, it's siphoning off just a little bit of the blood flow that's oxygen rich, so it can go to the actual cardiac muscle. Think of it almost as the heart taking its own payment. I'm doing all this work, I'm pumping all this blood, now give me a little bit of that to keep myself working. That's how the heart functions. It needs this blood flow. From the coronary artery, so the left and right coronary arteries. You can then go out around through the circumflex artery. You'll notice the circumflex is going to wrap around the heart. You then have the anterior interventricular artery. Anterior front, interventricular between the ventricles. It's running right down the front middle of the heart. It's running along where the interventricular septum would be. You then have this marginal artery just hanging out down around the side, again helping to carry blood away from the main vessels. You're going to have the great cardiac vein. Now if you notice, this great cardiac vein is coming down here. It's meant to collect blood now and take it to the posterior side where you have the coronary sinus. It's the great cardiac vein. You have the anterior cardiac veins. Again, we're on the anterior side, so it makes sense. All about collecting blood and taking it back. Now, if you notice, a lot of these veins are mirror imaging where the arteries are. Well, it makes sense if the arteries are carrying blood there, you need veins then to pick the blood up and bring it back. You have the small cardiac vein. It makes sense that smaller is just kind of collecting less blood. Posterior side. Start with the circumflex artery. We saw that on the anterior side. It keeps wrapping around to the posterior side. Marginal artery continues the blood flow. If you notice, the marginal artery comes off of that circumflex artery. You have then the right coronary artery. Just remember the right coronary with the left was the main coronary arteries coming off the aorta. From the main right coronary artery, come down to the marginal artery. And then we have this posterior interventricular artery coming off as well. So just like the anterior interventricular artery, the posterior interventricular artery is just on the back side. All right, venous return. We have this structure right here. That is your coronary sinus. That is what will collect all of the venous return before dumping it back into the right atrium. So the coronary sinus. We have the small cardiac vein. Now the small cardiac vein, like they implied it's smaller, is bringing blood back up to the coronary sinus. So the small cardiac vein. And while there's a small cardiac vein, there's also the great cardiac vein. The great cardiac vein is larger. It has a larger blood flow to dump into the coronary sinus. So the great cardiac vein. We then have the middle cardiac vein, if you notice, kind of following that posterior interventricular one. And then we have the posterior cardiac vein. So all of these veins are flowing back to the coronary sinus, so that blood can go back into the right atrium, back into circulation. So you pull some blood out of the actual aorta, right and left coronary artery, distribute it through the entire heart, all the cardiac muscle gets blood, comes back in the venous return to the coronary system, in the coronary sinus, and back into the right atrium again. So basically, that is the coronary circulation, keeping the heart functional, keeping the heart healthy with plenty of blood, nutrients, and oxygen. Some imbalances. Unfortunately, the heart sometimes doesn't quite work the way it should. Angina pectoris. Now, in this case, it ends up causing weakened cells. It won't necessarily kill anything, but it weakens cells or weakens whole areas of the heart. What's happening here is there's fleeting or very short breaks where there isn't continuous oxygen supply. Those cells, when they are in lack of oxygen, get weaker because they're not able to function properly. So this itself is not necessarily going to kill usually. It might be in conjunction with something else, but this is simply weakening the cells. And now I said simply, but it still can be quite problematic because as more and more cells get weaker, the heart can't function normally. But there are worse things. Myocardial infarction, for example. In the case of a myocardial infarct, this is a heart attack. This is when there is a prolonged period of absence of oxygen to either the entire heart or a portion of the heart. Now, there can be different levels of infarcts. There can be mild, which people can survive, and then massive ones where people cannot survive. But what's happening here now is this lack of oxygen is killing the cells in the area affected. So if it's only a small area, it might be survivable. But if the entire half heart is lacking oxygen, that one might be problematic. If it is survived, any of the cells that were damaged and killed are replaced with non-contractile scar tissue. That means those cells will never contract again. So that means the heart itself, as it contracts, that area that was damaged and replaced with scar tissue isn't contracting. The contractions are weaker and not as efficient. So even surviving a heart attack, the heart itself still is left in a slightly weakened state. Now, through exercise and training and rehabilitation, that heart can become potentially just as strong, but you've got to work at it. Build the heart back up and get stronger under medical supervision. Because you don't want to get too quickly into it because you can cause yourself more problems. So myocardial infarct or a heart attack. Coronary artery disease. Now in coronary artery disease, it's the buildup of plaque. As plaque or this fatty substance builds up inside the vessel, it obstructs the blood flow. The more obstruction to blood flow, the less blood flow is getting through, the harder the heart has to work. Now, this goes hand in hand with atherosclerosis. In the case of atherosclerosis, it's the actual hardening of vessel walls by the buildup of plaque. You're saying, well, does it make a difference if the vessel wall is hardened? The blood's still going through. True, but one of the factors of how you maintain blood pressure is your arteries are vasodilating and vasoconstricting. If the walls are getting harder, they can't move as easily, which means you can't regulate your blood flow as easily. So it's kind of important to make sure the blood vessels are healthy. So if you notice up top here, with this arrow pointing, you can see how thin that vessel is until it gets, again, thicker and wider. That vessel is going to be having a blockage in there. What you're seeing, this black, is a dye injection in the blood. So pretty much wherever the black is, that's the inside of the vessel. So where there's a pinpoint, a very thin area, that vessel's much more narrow than what it is right afterwards. So that's showing there is a buildup of plaque inside that vessel. That's an atherosclerotic coronary artery problem. That could become very serious because now you're not getting enough circulation into the rest of your coronary system. Shifting gears into the sheep heart, because we'll do the sheep heart for a dissection in lab, and it's showing similarities across different animals. In the sheep heart, you can notice a lot of the same structures. We still have the left ventricle, the right ventricle. We have the left atrium, we have the right atrium. Now remember what valves are in between them. The left atrium to left ventricle is this bicuspid valve. You can see how the bicuspid valve is held in place by these chordae tennae, the strings, and this papillary muscle. Now if you're wondering, well, hold on, how'd you know this left side? Look at the thickness of the wall. The left ventricular wall is thicker than the right ventricular wall. That's because the left ventricle is pumping to the entire systemic circulation. The right side, we know we have the tricuspid, so there's the tricuspid valve, with the chordae tennae below it. Well, that's showing the valves of how you get from the atria down to the ventricles. But leaving the ventricles, you have to go through the aortic and pulmonary valves. Right here, you notice this is the aorta coming up. This means that is the aortic semilunar valve. The pulmonary one is not visible, so you can't see the pulmonary valve in this particular cut. You can see the interventricular septum. You'll be able to notice this is all myocardium. This thin line is the endocardium, and this thin line is the epicardium. So different layers of the heart. So again, some very similar structures here. And looking at another one, same idea, just a little different view on this one. You're still seeing the right and left ventricle, right and left atria. You're still seeing the tricuspid and bicuspid valve, the chordae tennae, papillary muscle, interventricular septum. So the idea is take a look at different views. When you're doing a heart dissection, looking at pictures, make sure you have the cut, but look at it from different angles. Look at both sides. Anatomy is three-dimensional, so you have to be able to understand it from multiple different angles. So looking at the sheep heart there, as well as some disorders previous to that.